pull up a chair. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe before we get started, because there's always another story waiting at this table. Tonight, I want to tell you about a woman named Diane Ashford and an old will she was never supposed to find, tucked inside a filing cabinet that was only supposed to hold tax records. Diane's father-in-law, Walter, had passed away peacefully 3 months earlier at 81, and Diane, who ran a small business helping families sort through a lifetime of belongings after a loss, had offered to organize his home office before the estate sale. It seemed like the kind of quiet, useful thing she could do for her husband while he grieved. She didn't expect to find, folded inside a manila envelope at the back of the bottom drawer, a handwritten will dated nearly 30 years earlier, never filed, never mentioned. Leaving the family house, the same house Diane's husband had grown up in, not to his own children, but to a woman named Margaret Doyle. Diane read the name 3 times. She had never heard it in 12 years of marriage. Diane was 44 years old, and after 2 decades in estate organizing, she had learned to read old documents the way other people read faces, noticing what was underlined, what was crossed out, what had clearly been written in a hurry, and what had been written with care. This will had been written with care. Whoever Margaret Doyle was to Walter, he had thought about the wording for a long time before setting it down on paper. She didn't mention it to her husband, Greg, that evening. And if you've ever had to deliver news you don't fully understand yourself yet, you already know exactly why she waited. She didn't panic, and she didn't call a lawyer right away either. Instead, she went back to the office the next morning before anyone else arrived and searched more carefully than she had the first time. In a shoebox behind a stack of old tax folders, she found a bundle of letters, postmarked over a span of nearly 15 years, all addressed to Walter in the same handwriting, all signed simply, Margaret. She found photographs tucked between the pages of an old ledger, Walter younger, standing beside a woman Diane didn't recognize, in front of a small lake house that wasn't the family home. She found a birthday card, more recent, maybe 5 years old, wishing Walter a happy 76th birthday, signed, Love Always, M and C, 2 initials, not 1. Diane sat with that shoebox for a long time before she did anything else. She thought about Greg's mother, who had passed away 9 years earlier, believing, as far as Diane knew, that her marriage had been a steady, unremarkable one. She thought about how many family dinners, how many holidays, had happened underneath a secret that apparently ran for at least 15 years and possibly much longer. Greg's family had always described his childhood as an ordinary one, comfortable, quiet, unremarkable in the way people mean it as a compliment. His father worked long hours at a small manufacturing company, 2 towns over, often traveling for supplier meetings that sometimes stretched into overnight trips. Nobody questioned, because that was simply what his job required, or so everyone had always assumed without asking too closely. She made careful copies of everything before she put the originals back exactly where she'd found them, a habit from 20 years of handling other people's most private belongings with more care than most people handle their own. She thought about the lake house in the photograph too, a place she had never once heard mentioned in 12 years of family stories, holidays, or old home movies, as if an entire second chapter of Walter's life had simply been kept in a separate room nobody in the family knew existed. She spent the next 2 weeks doing what she did best professionally, quietly and carefully, except this time the case was her own family. She confirmed, through public records, that Margaret Doyle was still alive, 80 years old, living 2 counties over. She found a marriage record showing Margaret had never married, and buried in a genealogy database she used occasionally for probate work, she found a birth certificate for a daughter, Claire Doyle, born the same year as Greg, listing no father's name at all. She cross-referenced old business travel records. Greg still had boxed in the garage against the postmarks on Margaret's letters, and found what she expected to find, a pattern of overnight trips that lined up, again and again, with a town 2 counties over, the same town where Margaret had lived her entire adult life. Diane finally brought it to Greg on a quiet evening, the shoebox and the birth certificate laid out on their own kitchen table. She told him everything, in order, the way she would walk any client through a difficult discovery. Greg went very still. "I think your father may have had another family," Diane said gently. "I think you might have a sister you've never met." Greg didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he asked the only question that seemed to matter. "Does she know about us?" Greg sat with that question for a long time before answering it himself, out loud, more to the shoebox than to Diane. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think he ever talked about any of us to anyone, not really." He said it wasn't an accusation, just an observation about a man who had apparently spent decades keeping every part of his life in a separate, carefully labeled drawer, the same way he organized everything else. They found out together that Claire didn't know either, not fully. She had grown up believing her father had simply left before she was born, a story her mother had repeated so often it had become the only version anyone questioned. When Greg and Diane finally reached out, carefully, through a letter rather than a phone call, Claire wrote back within a week, asking only one question of her own. "Did he ever talk about me?" Diane made the introductions herself, the way she might guide a nervous client through a difficult conversation, and stayed close by, quietly, in case anyone needed a steadying presence in the room. He hadn't, not by name, not in front of anyone who would have understood what he meant. But the 15 years of letters, the photographs, the birthday card signed by 2 initials instead of 1, told a version of the truth that words never had the chance to. Diane watched her husband read through the letters that evening, one by one, in the order Margaret had written them, and understood, for the first time, that some of Greg's own quietness, the way he tended to keep difficult feelings folded up and put away rather than spoken aloud, hadn't come from nowhere. The old will was never legally valid, too many decades unfiled to hold up on its own, and Diane made sure Greg understood that clearly before either of them made a single decision about it. But Greg didn't need a court to tell him what his father had clearly wanted. He and Diane sat down with a lawyer, properly this time, and worked out a settlement that gave Claire a fair share of what should have been hers for most of her life. Not because a judge required it, but because a family finally chose honesty over convenience, decades later than it should have arrived. Diane keeps a small copy of that same birthday card in her own desk now, the one signed "Love Always, M&C. Not because she needs the reminder, but because it feels wrong to let 2 initials disappear back into a drawer a second time. A year after that first shoebox, Claire comes to Thanksgiving now, sitting at the same table Walter used to sit at, in the same house he apparently loved enough to leave behind on paper, even if he never found the courage to say so out loud. Diane told me once that going through other people's belongings for a living had taught her that the truth almost always survives somewhere, in a drawer, in a letter, in handwriting nobody thought to hide carefully enough. She just never expected to find it in her own family's filing cabinet. So tell me, whoever's listening tonight, do you think Walter ever meant for that will to be found, or was writing it down simply the only way he knew how to say the truth, even if only to himself? I'd really love to hear what you think. So leave it in the comments, and if this one moved you, give it a like before you go. Pull up a chair again next week, and I'll tell you another one. Until then, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.